A story was told of a woman who raised three sons. These three sons grew up to be very successful businessmen, and they eventually left her house where she grew old. And the sons all got together and they decided that they wanted to each provide the mother with a gift to let her know their appreciation for everything that she had done and sacrificed for them. The first son said, I'm going to get our mom a big house so in her old age she can enjoy a nice mansion to walk around and spend her time in. The second son said, I want to get her a Mercedes Benz so that she can ride around town in luxury. And the third son said, I'm going to do something really special because you know how mom likes her Bible verses. So I'm going to get her this parrot that is specially trained, that all you have to do is give the parrot the chapter and the verse of the Bible, and the parrot will read it out for her. And you know, mom, her sight is not so good, so she's going to love that. So they all went to present their mom with that gift and see the reaction. So the first son, who gave her the mansion, she said, Thank you, son, for providing me with this mansion, but I'm old. I'm not very mobile and able to move around. So I only stay in one room and I have to get a cleaner to clean the house because it's so big. To the second son, she said, Thank you for providing me with this Mercedes Benz. It's a very thoughtful gift. However, I don't really go anywhere. I mostly stay in the house. So the car stays parked in the driveway. The third son, she had a special reaction for his gift. She said to him, Son, your gift is the most thoughtful of all of these. You know your mother so well. That chicken was so delicious. My sister said at one time that if Dad Joke had a face, it would be our dad, Ebenezer Agboka. So I wanted to start off this video with a joke because that's something that he liked to do, and that was one of his best and favorite jokes that he told all the time. So for this video, me and my family just wanted to talk about the grieving process, what it was like to lose him, and I hope that you gain something from this video. He passed away on April 16 of 2023, and it has now been 1 year. It has been a long year. It has been a difficult year, and myself, my sister, and my mom, we've all had different experiences, and within this video, we're going to talk a little bit about that.
To start at the beginning of this journey, in 2019, I started to notice little things that were not right with my husband, Ebenezer. He would ask me questions about things that he should have known the answer to. And he would be talking about the same thing over and over, wanting to rehash and analyze old memories over and over again. Sometimes he would struggle to find words that he wanted to say. Later on, he started making poor financial decisions, and he couldn't remember how to use his phone.
When he came to visit me in Canada, shortly after I'd had a serious car accident that left me physically unscathed but mentally shaken, I was looking to him to take care of me, but I realized he was not capable. He just seemed distracted, scatterbrained, in need of guidance, almost childlike. And after a few days of frustration, I accepted the reality and tried to enjoy his visit as best I could and take care of him also.
In 2019, November, he had a mini stroke that landed him in the hospital. After they had done all the MRIs and different tests, the neurologist came to his hospital room and told both of us that he had vascular dementia related to all the strokes and mini strokes that he had had.
Initially, I only shared the diagnosis with a few trusted friends. But as he continued to decline and I traveled back and forth between Canada and the US, I opened up more. I let my gut instinct tell me who was safe to speak to. I was scared and overwhelmed, especially after I did some research and I found that within 3 to 5 years of diagnosis, most people die. I wasn't ready to lose my dad, and it just made me so sad to realize that this was how he was going to go. I'd always known him as being vibrant and active, walking so fast that I had to run to catch up with him, and now he was literally diminishing in front of my eyes.
So I remember my mom had a conversation with me where she told me that things were going to get worse and that she was going to need help with taking care of him. And I didn't actually know what that would mean for me. So I was a little bit numb, and I kind of took things day by day as they came. I remember when I would go in and visit him in the hospital after this mini stroke, he would always ask me, "Mark, when are you going to be taking me home?" And something that was very tough to hear was when eventually, after they had done their series of tests at the hospital, I picked him up and I had him in the car, and he said, "I thought that I was going to go home the same night that I went in." And then he said they started running all these tests, and I kept asking the doctors questions, and they weren't answering me, and I didn't know if I was dying. He said, "I thought I was dying, and they just didn't want to tell me." They say that your parents are your first superheroes, and that's what it was like for me. I remember thinking that being an accountant was like being James Bond or something, because I would just see him leaving the house in his suit and his briefcase. I didn't really know what he did, but I knew that I wanted to be like him. And you look up to your parents, and as a son, you look up to your dad, and then he's the one who always takes care of you. And then to see him in this vulnerable position that I had never seen him in before was quite difficult, and I didn't know how my life was going to change from there going forward.
We all knew that dementia was the long goodbye, and I wondered how that long goodbye would affect our family. What would be the impact on all of us? I knew that our roles in the family would have to change, and I would have to be the strong one. I would have to maybe talk for both of us and make decisions for both of us. And it was a role that I was not used to. I had to watch this once vibrant, happy-go-lucky jokester, friendly, caring person, people person, go downhill. Decline was rapid. The numerous strokes and mini strokes had taken their toll. He had one located at the base of his brain that doctors felt he would not survive. They recommended DNR, DNI, and hospice care. So, after talking it over with my children, Christelle and Mark, we made the very, very difficult decision to make him DNR, DNI, and put him in hospice in a nursing home. It was very difficult to see him decline physically and mentally.
Those 2 weeks, I felt like I was falling apart physically and emotionally. I was on edge and snappish around my family. I was tripping on the sidewalk. I had been training for a half marathon when, while running, my legs buckled and I had a hard blow to my knee. This was one of the most stressful and worst moments of the whole experience. It was what I later learned is anticipatory grief, which is when you're grieving someone who hasn't yet passed. I returned to Canada with an anxious and heavy heart. The next month, I moved to the US to work at a higher level of the same religious organization. It was a challenging transition, but I was grateful to be closer to my family. I was only a 4-hour bus ride, or drive away. And some of my most cherished memories are the moments that my mom, brother, and I went to the nursing home where my dad was under hospice care, and my brother would play the ukulele and YouTube. And we would sing songs that my dad loved, such as He's Got the Whole World in His Hands, Come Thou Fount, and Three Little Birds. Sometimes I felt heavy after these visits, but I tried to focus on my gratitude that my dad was still there and we were together.
I remember one of the toughest parts of the experience for me being a work-life balance, because every time something happened with my dad, I had to go right back to work. I would take a few days off, I would take a family leave time, and then I'm right back into work. And the type of field that I work in, doing peer counseling, is something where you have to be heavily invested in your clients to be able to do the job. So my mind was always scattered, and it was very difficult to do what I needed to do. And this became extremely overwhelming at a point to where I was having issues with keeping up with my job. I was making mistakes. I was getting to be very forgetful. And I eventually just had to take some time off. That was also going along with now having a little bit of caretaking responsibilities. At the beginning, it was very hard. It was hard to see him like that in the first place. And then it was just very demanding, and it was something that came about for me unexpectedly. But in retrospect, I have cherished those moments, because everybody who knows him knows that he was always on the go. He was in the car, he was in a plane going to another country. So we spent a lot of time together during that time that he wasn't well. And during those times, he used to say, "I'm proud of you, son. I love you. You're a good man." Things that, as a traditional African dad, he was not generally saying before he got sick. I remember it being a really somber thing to go visit him, but the music, going in there with my mom, my sister, and sometimes other people who would join us, it felt almost like it was more for us, or more for me at least, than it was for him, because it was a distraction. It was something to take my mind off of seeing him in that bed in the condition that he was in. And sometimes his roommates would join in and they enjoyed it, and sometimes the staff would come to the room and they would listen and they would ask us questions about him, and that was just a mental relief at that time. I remember the day that I got the call from the hospital that my dad had passed away. I was actually out running errands, and I saw a familiar number because they would call me whenever they couldn't reach my mom. So I was a little bit concerned automatically when I saw this number on my phone. I picked it up, and the doctor said, "Hi, is this Mark Agboka?" And I said, "Yes." They said, "We've been trying to get in contact with your mother to let her know that your father has passed away 2 something p.m., April 16. And I didn't have an immediate reaction to this because I knew that I had to inform the family. I had to inform my mom and my sister. And unfortunately, I didn't want to be the bearer of bad news, but that was a position that I was placed in. So they told me, "I'm sorry for your loss." And immediately I just sat and gathered my thoughts for a little bit. I gave my mom a call. She didn't pick up. I called again. She didn't pick up again. So I sent a text, "Please call me as soon as you can." So she called me back a few minutes later, and I could tell by the tone of her voice that she hadn't heard any of the voicemails or saw any of the calls from the hospital at that point in time, because I knew she wouldn't have sounded like that. So I told her that unfortunately My dad had passed away, her husband, and I just remember she was very sad, crying, and I said, let's meet at the house, and then we can go over to the nursing home together. And in between that time, I called my sister. My mom called some of his siblings and family to inform them. And we went to we went to the nursing home and we saw him. And the thing for me was, in his last days, he was very sick. And it was just very hard to go in there and look at him and see him in the type of condition that he was in. So despite feeling very sad when I saw him, I also felt finally he's at rest and finally he's experiencing some peace, because I know he was in pain. I know he was suffering in that type of condition. He outlived the expectations that they told us that he was going to live 6, 7 months prior. I knew after that we had a road ahead of us planning for his funeral and planning for his burial, which was also a big process. I know during that time I felt very numb emotionally. And now that I know more about the grieving process, I know that it was a part of the denial stage of the process, where my mind was just kind of protecting me from all the emotions that I was going to feel eventually. Everything felt very flat. I was just going through the motions, whether it was at work or whether it was with friends. I felt very disconnected and isolated, but also I was getting a whole bunch of calls for support. Sometimes I answered the calls, sometimes it was difficult and I didn't answer the calls. I appreciated them, but it was overwhelming. It was overwhelming. So we got to the funeral. I was able to get through it. It was very hard, but the support of both family and friends assisted me with that. When the funeral was done, after a lot of people visiting, after a lot of phone calls, after a lot of planning, now it was very quiet. And I had to think to myself, what am I going to do next? You don't envision a life or a world without your parent, without your dad in it. Despite the fact that you know that that's going to happen eventually, there's no way to prepare for that. There's no way to truly prepare for that. So I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know what my purpose was. I started to think about my whole life and say to myself, what am I going to do with my life from here? I didn't go to any kind of a formal therapy, but I leaned on support from others who had been there. I've done a lot of reading, I've watched videos, and I've had time to reflect. And I got through that period of numbness. And then I felt very emotional about it. And that's because I was experiencing a delayed grief. And it just started to hit me. And then I was like, he's really gone. And that's just the way that it is right now. I fell far out of my routine, my gym routine, everything that I used to do. I wasn't doing it for a period of time. And then I started to take a look at my life and realize I have to start implementing the things into my life that are important for wellness. So I started trying to eat better, put in my exercise time, and I had to schedule and force myself to do these things because physically, at a point when the depression was really bad, it was even hard for me to get out of my bed. It felt like I literally had an extra weight. I woke up with a weighted vest that I had to carry up with me when I got out of my bed. So now, 1 year later, despite the fact that it's still difficult, I still think of him in many different scenarios. Every day I think of something different, good, bad, and in between. But I'm at a point where my healing process has begun, and actually, it's more than begun. It's much better than it was even 4 or 5 months ago, but I know that this is a lifelong process, and I know that God is going to take me through it.
My brother had called me at that moment, and I knew instinctively that something was wrong. I asked him, "How are you?" I always asked, "How are you?" first, so I could gauge from the tone of the family member's voice if I should brace myself for bad news. He said, "Not good. Dad passed away this afternoon." I felt like my world was spinning, but I had no choice but to board the plane. So I boarded, and I cried as inconspicuously as I could in my window seat. The days leading up to the funeral are a blur. A lot of my time was spent planning the funeral and trying to squeeze in work here and there, often with very few results. I didn't have the bandwidth to fully process my grief, but there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And my body did keep the score because I suffered from insomnia for 6 weeks. The week before the funeral was the most difficult. I was making mistakes that I would normally not make, even driving into a restricted area, and that caused a lot of other issues. I was distracted, and I was just emotionally very burdened and drained. But the day of the funeral, surrounded by old and new friends and family, I felt loved and supported, and that gave me the strength to speak and just to navigate through the whole day, as well as the next day, the burial, which was very difficult, and I'm so grateful for that. So the months after his passing can only be characterized as drowning. I was in a fog. I felt like there was a constant dark cloud above my head, whether it was sunny, raining, whatever the weather. My internal weather was just dark and dreary. And I can't say I did the things you're supposed to do to heal. I didn't join a grief support group. I didn't go into consistent counseling. I didn't journal. I just tried to keep my inner circle close, to keep only those people around me who really love me, and just put one foot in front of the other. And I prayed as best I could. Over the past year, I've come to realize that grief is something not many people understand. And everyone's experience of grief is different. So you might have all lost the same person, but your individual experience will not be the same as your family members or maybe family friends. And I've learned to have grace for myself along the grieving process, that some days I'll be fine, other days I'll feel the same as I did when I first heard the news, and it's okay. And I've learned to have grace for other people who either are not capable of understanding grief because they have not experienced it, or it's something that scares them, so they run away from it. Or for people who might be experiencing grief in all different aspects of life, not just the loss of a person, but maybe the loss of a job, the loss of a relationship, the loss of health. And I just hope that with this greater empathy, I can make a difference in the world. And I've been trying to just share little tidbits about grief on my social media, just to show people, grief is a normal, natural part of life. And don't run away from people who are grieving, because it'll be you. That's just how life goes. Everyone experiences it at some point, and we need to just have more love and care for each other through these difficult moments. So I do hope that these small seeds that I'm planting will make a difference in the long run.
When he passed on April 16, 2023, even though it was anticipated and expected, it was still a shock. I was now a bona fide widow who would have to continue my life's journey alone. I would have to figure out who I am without him. Even the word widow caused my heart a pain in my heart. How would I carry on without him? And what would my life look like? Even now, I can't believe that he's gone. I didn't expect to be alone at this age. After the funeral, I felt like there was a heavy black cloud constantly hanging over my head, and that at any moment that cloud would burst and drench me with a heaviness of grief that would pull my body down to the ground like gravity. There were days that I would wake up with a plan of something I had to do, and I would not get up. I would have to push myself. I missed his presence. I miss his laughter, his companionship, someone to talk to, share with, depend on, to help me with difficult things. He was no longer there to take care of the car and drive me where I needed to go. I miss him every day. Time has passed. A year has gone by. I've joined some support groups, prayer groups. I go to church. I push myself to go out and do things. I'm still trying to find a place for myself in this world. I've had my faith in God to hang on to. I have good days and bad days. The clouds still come and go, but the colors have changed. These days the blackness is gone, and I'm able to see the sun. The illness and loss of my husband of 43 years is something that will always be with me, because it was one of the hardest experiences of my life. To me, he's gone too soon. I didn't expect to lose him after I retired. We were supposed to travel together, do things together, enjoy life. I have memories of him, and he will live on through those memories.
I want to thank everybody for taking this time to watch this video. As all of us have shared, it has been a difficult journey over the past year for me and my sister losing our dad, and for my mom losing her husband. But through it all, God has kept all of us through it. As you can see, we're all still here. It's not easy all the time. There's ups and there's downs, and there's everything in between. But if you lean on God and you lean on the people around you, your family and your support system, you can get through anything. I'm gonna let it shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Sing it. This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Sing it with me. This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice singing. Here's my heart, oh, take and seal it. Seal it for thy courts above. My heart, oh, take and seal it. Seal it for thy
Dad.
Hi, Christian. This is Dad.
Happy birthday.
Happy 40th birthday.
We love you.
We love you and enjoy this day. Your special day, the day that is reserved just for you.
Other stuff. I want to thank my parents for coming in as well. Yes.
I just wanted to say, on behalf of my wife and myself, to applaud you, man, for this initiative. It took a lot of energy to be able to come to this point. 3 years ago, you wanted to do this, and of course, it didn't happen. So there's a time for everything.
Sure.
So where do we go from here?
I just wanted to do this live to just talk about this weekend. Y'all know this weekend was Mother's Day. Yesterday was Mother's Day. We didn't have a Mother's Day because yesterday we had the services for my dad. It's been a long time coming because he passed 1 month ago as of yesterday. It's been 1 month and 1 day. Time just goes really fast. And this was looming in the background because I was like, even though I know he's gone, it's one thing to know he's gone, and it's another thing to have a service for him and to watch him go in the ground. The good parts of this weekend are just the family and friends that rallied around me. The people that let me know that I don't have to go through this alone. My dad loved suits. He wore suits every day, 7 days a week. I remember we had this old neighbor that we used to live by, and the neighbor was having a barbecue in the backyard, and they were like, "Oh, Mark, come to the barbecue." So I went over. They were our next door neighbor, and I went over to tell my dad. He was sleeping at the time. I woke him up. I was like, "The neighbors invited us to this barbecue." He's like, "Oh, hold on." So I came back over, and they're like, "Where's your dad?" And I'm like, I'm guessing that he's probably jumping in the shower, and then he's gonna put on his suit. And sure enough, he took a shower and put on a suit just to go to the next door neighbor's backyard barbecue in the summer. I like suits, you know. When I picked out this suit, I thought of him. This is his pin, actually. This is the Ghana flag. This is one of his pins that I took. But the rest of the suit, I picked it out, and I was like, he would love this suit if he saw it. It's true. Actually, the limo driver who took us to the burial ground was telling me that death connects people. Like, it's a sad occasion, obviously, but it's an occasion where people come together. And he was like, God puts people in your life that you never expected, you know. And that's what I have found for me, actually, during this time. There's some people that I expected to show up for me and did not. And there's some people who I would have no idea that they would show up for me, and they did, you know. I'm thankful for that. As his only son, he had very high expectations of me. He wanted me to do well in school. He actually wanted me to follow in his footsteps and become an accountant, but, he ultimately accepted when I didn't do that. I went to school for business, but I ended up becoming a mental health counselor. He wanted me to be an upstanding citizen. The way that I dress was very important to him. The way that he dressed was very important to himself as well. I know for an occasion like this, if he was here, he would want to make sure that I was in the proper garments. Everybody who knows him knows that, including my mom. I remember many times in the morning, this is one of the biggest parts of the routine, picking the shirt and the tie and making sure that everything matched and everything like that before they left the house. Now I would say that I developed somewhat of a hybrid style, because before we would be getting up for church and he would be like, "That's what you're wearing? Go iron that and put on a tie." But now I've kind of adapted some of that from him. My dad believed that I could do anything in life. Sometimes he even believed in me more than I believed in myself. He always had suggestions on what he wanted me to do. And I say that because anyone with an African father knows that suggestions are also not multiple choice. It's like, I want you to do those things, period. And if you don't do them, I'm going to be disappointed or upset. But I always know that he wanted the best for me, so I appreciate those things now. In my upbringing, I do remember that my dad was very strict, but also loving. He held on for a long time, as long as he could. Our family was able to come and visit him multiple times from wherever they were coming from. And he received a lot of calls, and, he fought the fight. I'll always remember him for his fighting spirit, his positive attitude, and his confidence in himself and those around him. So a couple of things I'm just going to say to close. My dad's favorite boxer was Muhammad Ali. My dad loved Muhammad Ali. And especially when he was sick, I would sit there and watch these same old classic matches with him. Ali versus Joe Frazier and George Foreman and all that stuff. And he would just sit there laughing and laughing and laughing, listening to Ali and all this. And a strategy that Ali had was the rope-a-dope, which was that he would go into the corner of the ropes and hold up his hands, and then the other boxer would just keep punching him until he gets tired. And he coined that term rope-a-dope, because then they get tired, and then when they got tired, then he would start punching back, and then he would win the bout, or he would win the match. And I felt like my dad did the rope-a-dope on these doctors many times, because they would really look at him and tell us, he's about to go. He doesn't have much time left. He has days, he has minutes, he has weeks. They said this to us probably more than a year this was happening. And he would get out of that rehab facility and he would do his work that he was supposed to do, and he'd get back on his feet and he would start talking again, and he would, even with the walker, he would start walking again. And I was just amazed by that strength and that resilience. So I saw that in all stages of his life. I've heard it from before I was around. I know it from when I was born and on. And I saw it at the end of his life as well. So I just want to close with this verse, Isaiah 25, verse 8, which says, "He will swallow up death forever, and the Lord God will wipe away tears from all faces. The rebuke of his people he will take away from all the earth, for the Lord has spoken." Amen.